Okay, so let's make it more general for the moment. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, I'll give you a few minutes at the end if you want to ask our two panelists a question. We'll try to get a few questions in from the audience. So to broaden it out, Minister, as the professor says, and pretty much everybody agrees, protectionism doesn't make economic sense, because in the longer term, it's going to cost everybody. So what's driving increasing protectionism, not just in the United States, but in other nations as well? Because if it doesn't make economic sense, does it mean it then becomes a political statement from the person imposing that protectionism to almost appear as like a nationalist moment to bring people towards that decision maker politically rather than economically?
Well, it's easy to explain. I think what is driving the current, what seems like a fundamentally flawed policies is, first of all, let's set the scene. I mean, there's a geostrategic competition between China and the United States. We know that. China has what it takes to become a superpower because it has human capital, it has state-of-the-art infrastructure, and now it's catching up in technology. The United States considers itself as the hegemon power. So we know from history, there's always been tensions between existing superpowers and emerging ones. It doesn't have to end this way, meaning in a trade war or any other wars, but it does in the past. I mean, history tells us that we more frequently see tensions rather than cooperation. So what lies behind is very simple. Go back to 20 years ago, roughly speaking. China accounts for about 8% of global manufacturing. Today, China accounts for more than 30% of global manufacturing. Who lost ground? United States, European Union, and Japan. United States clearly also sees this. Again, go back to 20 years ago and just visualize a world map. Which country commands as the main trading partner of the rest of the world? Maps are all over the place. Clearly, it was the United States 20 years ago. Today, it's China. Now, normally, the way you would respond, the way I would respond, is that, look, we need sound policies, structural reforms to regain ground. Instead, it looks like this rivalry, combined with lack of, obviously, clear understanding, is that it leads you to go after quick fixes. And quick fixes, which is also to do with populism, nationalism, is to blame others and is to present it in a simple fashion. The reality is you have to be more competitive. You have to invest in upskilling, reskilling your population. You have to invest in your infrastructure. And you have to, there's a long list of homework. But those are politically difficult to deliver. They take time, and they're difficult. So structural policy has been lacking in most countries. And when you can't deliver structural transformation, then you rely on monetary policy to fix things. Monetary policy in many parts of the developed world have been doing the heavy lifting over the last couple of decades in the face of difficulties. So my point here is that I think we know what drives it is losing ground. But how do you regain ground? Again, the sophisticated way would be to do the right thing and deliver on reforms. The easy way would be to blame everyone else and come up with high tariffs as a fix.
Let's see. Okay, so protectionism is also not helping your friends to concentrate more on yourself rather than the outside world. We know that the drastic cuts to USAID, the Agency for International Development, has already or is going to cost lives. Myanmar's recent earthquake, the Americans have been for decades maybe the most important first responder, sending hundreds of rescue workers. They sent 3 administrators. They didn't send a single rescue worker. They laid off recently some people working for the federal government on the US nuclear program. They realized very quickly within a couple of days that it was actually a national security issue, so they were told to come back to their office. The office said, sorry, they've been excluded from their federal email, so we can't get in touch with them. So they couldn't re-employ them. Professor Sachs, when you were president of the Earth Institute at Columbia University, it focuses, I've got to read this from the notes, it focuses on sustainable development, this institute at Columbia, including research in climate change, geology, global health, economics, management, agriculture, ecosystems, urbanization, energy, water, everything that we need to live. So how does protectionism affect these kinds of relationships between one country and another country?
Yeah,
It's actually deglobalization.
I want to answer that by continuing on with the brilliant explanation that that the minister just gave about the hard stuff and the easy stuff.
Yeah.
So just to say, in American politics, the swing states in the presidential elections in the last 3 elections in particular have been the Midwestern states. So those are states like Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Minnesota. These are states that can go either way. And those states did suffer a decline of employment in manufacturing, not only or even mainly because of trade, but also heavily because of automation over the last 40 years. I come from Detroit, which is Motor City, used to be, and I used to go when young on school field trips to see the assembly lines, and there were actually workers on the assembly line. But now if you go to an automotive plant, it's all robots, very, very few people inside. That's not because the jobs went overseas. In that case, that's because the assembly line itself became an automated phenomenon. So Trump is giving an answer to those swing states. It's China's fault. It's Mexico's fault. It's Lesotho's fault. What the minister said is really important, that when he said that trade benefits the economy, but it could hurt some sectors. And what you do is not stop the trade, but you make sure that you pull everyone along, maybe in a regional policy, or maybe in job reskilling, or maybe in some other kind of public investment or education policy. Here's where the U.S. really failed over the last 40 years. We let the inequalities widen and widen, partly because of automation, partly because jobs did go overseas, but for the right reason. They had comparative advantage in those jobs. Skilled people got better and better salaries. Lower skilled people had their living standards fall. The gap widened. By the way, not just the income gap, the life expectancy became 10 years or more. So many of our epidemics, so many of our social problems relate to this widening inequality. The United States political system didn't address it at all for 40 years. And that comes to what I mentioned, the corruption of the political system. When candidates of both political parties are paid by rich donors for their reelection campaigns, and both parties then become the agents of tax cuts and no really addressing the social conditions, you end up with a Donald Trump coming in and selling a pseudo explanation, it's all China, and selling a pseudo remedy, a trade war. What the auto workers are going to learn right now is they're going to lose jobs by even the tariffs that have been put in place, because we need the intermediate parts brought in from elsewhere. Now they face higher costs, and the United States can't compete at all with Chinese electric vehicles. China